All right, everyone, welcome back into another props video. Going to be touching on the top prop bets in college football for Saturday on both PrizePicks and Underdog. But guys, just first a recap from last week, mostly because I'm still tilted about the Sanders Hail Mary to get the over last week. That was extremely tilting. Now, this wasn't the exact slip from last week. That was part of a slip that I mentioned. It was a 3-slip bet that had Sanders in there that would have cashed had he not connected on that Hail Mary. Tilting there. Honestly, that is like a staple bad beat right there. I feel like a lot of people like to use that word loosely or that phrase loosely. That was a bad beat. But looking at this week, guys, we are getting some good edges, and honestly, maybe too good of edges. That's kind of the theme, I think, is that this Lawton one, this under his rush plus receiving touchdowns, this one continues to rise in terms of its probability of hitting. So I don't know if PrizePicks are just sleeping on this one or if they just have straight conviction that it's going to hit, so they're not bumping it up. But I would assume another line has come in here that also said, yeah, he's not going to score a touchdown. Now, I will say I kind of get both sides of this one, where we can see he scored 2 rushing touchdowns, 1 touchdown, and then 2. But then you look at the matchup that he has going against Maryland, the 15th most difficult matchup. So I could see it going both ways there. But at the same time, that's just such a good bet that we kind of have to make it. Another one that is almost too good to believe is going to be this Jeremiah Love fantasy score under. Okay. So first and foremost, I want to point out that PrizePicks is clearly the outlier data point here. I always kind of mention this. That's kind of one way we can gain edge. We have these 3 data points that I'll typically put up here between the underdog line. We can compare against that. We can compare against the projection data and then the average sportsbook line as well. All 3 are telling us that the PrizePicks line is the clear outlier here. And so even at the respective line of 12.5, the average sportsbook line would be still slightly favoring the under there. So this is seemingly a good edge. Now, in terms of how the fantasy score line gets created for an average sportsbook line, this is a calculation. I kind of do 2 projections, a high and low projection. And all that means is that we take the straight up line of rush and receiving touchdowns. Now, typically speaking, for a lot of players, the likelihood of them scoring a rush or receiving touchdown is not that high. But for Love, it actually is pretty high. He has like a 55 or so % chance to score a touchdown. So the high projection, my point around this, the high projection, whether that be the Vegas line or the projection data, would still suggest that he's not going to get the over. So that seems to be a clear edge. Now, obviously, if he scores 2 touchdowns or something, then we have to worry about it. Could potentially be a high scoring game there against Colorado. Also could be, and it's not actually that high scoring. Could be a game in which Notre Dame just absolutely blows them out. Only 6.5 point favorites. That seems a little bit strange. I mean, Colorado really hasn't been playing all that well. But this is a slight, potential middling opportunity. I know there's a slight calculation difference between PrizePicks and Underdog, which is already being factored into here. But that's a little bit of a middling opportunity, but still, hopefully that one hits because that is a very big edge for us. We got another pretty good bet here, an Eevee bet that's popping up in there right now. And I should probably pause the video and make this bet. I'm going to do that actually. All right, now that bet's still there for you guys. By the time this uploads, there'll probably be, I don't know, an hour before lineup lock. By all means, use that. That's a great Eevee bet that we have there. And then one thing I want to call out here, guys, we are getting some pretty darn good edges on PrizePicks for sure. I don't mind grouping college football prop bets because I feel like it's in terms of fantasy score, which are typically these bets where we are getting the biggest edges on, because there's not as many sports books in there, we are really relying heavily, mostly on DraftKings, honestly, but maybe by lineup block or by game time for a lot of these games, we'll get more bets in there. FanDuel, BetMGM, PointsBet, Hard Rock Bet, ESPN Bet, we'll start to filter in those lines. So that's my way of saying that I actually don't mind grouping some of these bets together when we can do, all right, we got Evan Stewart for over his fantasy score. We got Sean Atkins. We got Caples for over their fantasy scores. I actually don't mind grouping them together like that. More or less just betting on more or less just betting on those sports picks being better than PrizePicks, or we can do the opposite of that, group them together for the under fantasy score. But all in all, it really shouldn't matter. I did want to call that out though, because that is pretty crazy. Another interesting one is Luke Altmyer for his fantasy score as well. So the thing with Luke Altmyer is he's a quarterback. This should be a 1-for-1 swap in terms of the fantasy score. And so guys, the simple fact that it's not, that's a pretty big edge for us. So again, this is a little bit of a middling opportunity where you could bet the higher on Underdog. We don't exactly want to do that because, well, the data is already telling us to bet the under. I kind of feel good with that. Now, I think the reason why the data and Vegas is kind of heavily expecting the under is given the matchup. Okay, the matchup with Penn State, who is the 22nd most difficult matchup for opposing quarterbacks. So interesting line there for sure. But I think you guys can all see why the under is being favorited there. Let's continue on. Corey Kiner. This is one that I mentioned for the Flex Friday video that I posted earlier today or on Friday, if you guys are watching this on Saturday, where already we were gaining a pretty good edge on Underdog. I told people to use that one. So by all means, I'm going to be running where we are seeing that edge there as well. So that is something that I think we should be looking at there. I think we should be targeting that bet. Looking at the data, we can see the clear outlier data point here is the PrizePicks line that we were getting there. So I like these two unders here that we're getting. Another one where we're kind of clearly seeing a big outlier is, I mean, this is kind of the theme with this, is that let's hope Vegas is right here. And again, that's why I mentioned, but we are seeing some pretty good edges here. We got Dowdo, Rico's brother. I'm just kidding. It's a slightly different spelling here, but again, PrizePicks the clear outlier. Now maybe the projection data should be a little bit higher, but we see that's a clear outlier. Another one, Travis Hunter for under his fantasy score. Average sportsbook line would have this set at 19, whereas Underdog would have it closer to 20. So if you think he's going to have a big game in that matchup against UCF, then you would want to bet his over on Underdog. Okay, continuing on, again, I'm kind of grouping these together with the over fantasy score, and we still have a few more guys. I mean, it's kind of crazy how many good bets we have in general on this slate, especially in terms of fantasy score. Too many options, really. So for the bet of the day, like it's gonna be, I mean, it's really whatever you guys want it to be because there's so many good big bets out there that you can run out. That's really tough for me to like say, oh, this is the best one. Again, I'm going to be grouping the over bets together for sure. And then it's kind of just picking and choosing which under bets I don't mind. DJ Giddings, I don't mind though as well, guys. Just again, kind of looking at it. Like I want to point out, they're really not expecting much out of him in the passing game, 10.5 receiving yards. And so that prop line difference between PrizePicks and Underdog, it's like the calculation aspect of it is less significant, I guess I would say there. Again, it's accounting for it already, but like when it's a low line, it doesn't really matter. It's more of a 1-for-1 swap, if that makes sense. And then just for what it's worth, we do have some almost good Eevee bets here, kicking points here for, oh man, I'm going to use this with that Miami prop bet again from Friday slate, but that's fine. Another kind of one where the fantasy score, we're favoring the over there. And again, guys, just want to reiterate the reason why I like these more specifically so is that typically speaking, the college football lines that we get are most of the bets are under bets that are being favored for, especially for fantasy scores. So whenever we get these like lines where the over fantasy score is being favored, that kind of stands out to me. That's kind of something I've learned and developed while using this tool. And so that's probably something I'll be looking at there as well to use. Again, I'm going to be grouping those over fantasy score prop bets together. So with that, let's go ahead and jump on into Underdog. And so for Underdog, it's not like we aren't getting any edges here. We are getting plenty of edges here as well. Jordan James for under his fantasy score on Underdog. Again, just looking at the PrizePicks line, PrizePicks has this at 16.5. Vegas is saying about 14.3. The one concern I have here is that the projection data does like his over. Miller Moss here as well. Two cool names to start off the Underdog section. But that's another decent one, kind of a more 1-for-1 swap. And kind of what I mean by that is average sportsbook line has it at 23.41, and they're favoring the under there pretty heavily. And so at 22.45, we're getting a pretty good edge there, pretty easy to tell we're getting a good edge there. Avery Johnson's an okay under both on PrizePicks and Underdog. But we can see we're already getting a limited board here on Underdog, like not as many good prop bets. Maybe a slight Eevee bet here for lot 2 for over 2.5 receptions, about a 54% likelihood. I like that one. That's going to be one that I would use on Underdog here. So really probably Miller, Moss, maybe Burns I could go with as well. Coleman, I don't mind. Kevin Coleman for over his receiving yards. We see the line should be set at 37. So at 31.5, we're getting pretty good edge there. The projection data also likes this over there as well. So some seemingly good lines there for Underdog as well, just not nearly as much. And so I would love to be able to use those profit boosts that we have on Underdog, but we're just not getting as many great bets. And so I might save some of those for the NFL slate. And I'll be coming out with that video probably on Saturday or maybe later tonight. So with that, guys, let's go ahead and get into the bets of the day for this slate. So we'll start with the Underdog bet slip here. If you guys don't want to include the Luke Altmyer middle opportunity, by all means don't. Like you don't have to. Okay, that's not going to be a bet that you have to use. I see this more as a 3-slip bet. Typically speaking, we want to be chasing those 3-slip bets on Underdog anyway. So I just went with the top 3 bets. If that receptions prop is available for you guys, by all means, use that over receptions, 2.5 receptions for lot 2. I just don't like using those because I fully expect that one to get bumped, maybe even by the time I'm done recording this video. But again, if it's there, use it. And then looking at prize picks, here's one of the over fantasy score prop bets that you guys can make. Again, I mentioned I'd be running out a couple of those, but the kind of better bet, DJ Giddens for under his fantasy score, Luke Altmyer for under his fantasy score. Again, a little bit of a milling opportunity. Dante Dowdle for under 16.5 fantasy score. Travis Hunter, if you guys don't want to use that one, I kind of get it. Maybe you want to bet the over on Underdog because it's fun. By all means, go for that. But then the two biggest outliers in terms of how Vegas sees it going, Jeremiah Love and Corey Kiner for under their fantasy scores as well.